All right. Hey, thank you all for joining us. As you can see, I brought the negotiating team for the Senate on the education, and so I want them to be here to be able to fill in details and answer any questions you may have. Justice Taylor, as you all have reported and know, has come in to mediate as of Monday, and I can tell you that the conversations have moved along more in the last week than they did from February to this point. And so I can't say enough good about former Chief Justice Taylor. He has been a rock star in every way, an impartial mediator who's moved this conversation along. Last night, in this very room, the governor and Justice Taylor and the entourage that followed them came in a very celebratory mood to tell us that they were excited about the deal that was struck between the House negotiators and the Senate negotiators, the people that I empowered and the people the Speaker empowered to have conversations last night. So we were fully anticipating having all the principals together last night at the mansion to shake hands and finalize the deal that would have benefited all Oklahoma students at a grand total of $750 million all in on education holistically from the private side and the public side. It was actually a suggestion that we empower our teams to meet without the principals by Leader Eccles yesterday. I thought it was a great suggestion by Representative Eccles to say, hey, let's get the floor leaders out of the room, the pro tem, the speaker, the governor, and let the people who actually know about education policy and education financing settle the deal. And so I appreciated him having that idea. We executed on that idea, and I was proud of the efforts that Representative McBride and Representative Baker, Senator Pemberton, and Senator Pugh put forth. They had a 2-hour meeting that resulted in an agreement between the negotiators, at least. Unfortunately, the House has come back today and wants to do some modifications to that agreement, and so we're not where we thought we'd be today standing before you. I've continually called for public negotiations. I reiterate that call. I think Justice Taylor was a great step in that direction because you had an impartial Oklahoman sitting in the room helping mediate. Tremendously helpful. I can't underscore that enough. But the public deserves to know what was on the table. So yesterday, it was going to be a teacher pay raise of $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, and $6,000. You know, we had gone up to $8,000 in our last iteration, but they brought us back down. You know, they rejected unanimously the teacher pay raise we sent them, and they asked us to go back down on that. So we had gone back down on that. $500 million total into the funding formula with weight changes for various things that I'll let the education experts go into more details on. But the main purpose was to push more revenue to smaller, more rural schools to change those weights. And then an increase in the Redbud fund from what we were at $44 million up to $100 million in that, so an additional $56 million aimed at helping schools that didn't have the ad valorem base, as you know the Redbud fund is designed to do. That was the deal as we understood it last night. It is not moving forward at this point. But we'll take any questions you may have. I'll take anything unrelated to education as well, but the main focus of this press availability will to allow you to hear from the people who've actually been in the room. So,
what was articulated by the House in terms of what changes they wanted? And we'll ask McCall as well, but I'd like to make sure we're getting the same answer from both parties.
They wanted to substantially increase money going into it from 750 to way beyond that. There's recurring revenue. When we look at this, the Senate has always been circumspect about spending beyond our means. You know, you've heard me talk week after week about walking into a $600 million shortfall, $800 million shortfall, 1.3, and our package was $750 million. That was the deal when the negotiators walked away from the table last night. There's other needs in financing. Nursing homes are seeing fixed costs stay smooth or actually go up. but actual residents go down, so there's a huge gulf in money there. Higher ed has asked for money. There's a whole plethora of other needs, and if we spend too much in one arena, we won't be able to meet the needs and have a sustainable budget going forward. But I'll let them speak to any more particulars if they have anything to add to that. Adam's kind of lost his voice.
From shouting or screaming? Or?
No, I think just a little worn out today.
Yeah.
A question on the total dollar amount. The package that you all suggested with the higher teacher pay raises, the $3,000 stipend, that would have cost above $800 million. So I'm curious, could you explain?
Wait,
Yeah.
let me get in there real quick.
Okay.
Yeah, please explain.
I apologize, and I'll let Dwayne.
No.
That was 818, but that was 300 of that only occurred one time. So what I'm enunciating when I talk about 750, I'm talking about recurring expenses year over year over year. And remember, that grows by 50 million next year, and it'll grow by another 50 million. So a total of 850 when all is said and done of recurring revenue. But that was a one-time stipend, 3,000 for teachers, certified personnel, and support staff that we were talking about in that other package.
Would you say, basically, the governor just gave a glowing review, we're gonna have something announced, possibly tomorrow. Are you saying that we're going back to drawing tab? What are we doing?
I didn't watch what the governor said. I've been locked up in meetings all day. We did have extremely productive meetings yesterday, so I would have had that same feeling if I would have had this press availability at 8 or 8:30 or even 9 than I do right now. So I don't know what, I'm not standing here refuting whatever he said because I don't know what time he said it and I don't know what context he said it in. But we left last night extremely hopeful.
So how close are you to an agreement? I guess is the question. The governor said very, very close. How close would you say you are?
We're further away today than we were yesterday.
I wanted to go back to the numbers, following up on Maria's question. So it sounds like your original package that you thought you all had agreed on was about 500 million in recurring costs, and then the 300 in one-time expenses, and now it's up to 750 in recurring costs, and then one-time expenses on top?
I think we're mixing two different plans of what
Okay.
we did. Yeah, that was the original, I think it was 354,000. That was for the escalated teacher pay raise that we had sent over there. And then there was, the other stipends that we had put in there were about $300 million of one-time dollars. Now, what we offered yesterday, we offered $500 million, which is the 3, 4, 5, and 6 pay raise, which is about $286 million. And then the rest of that money would have gone into the formula. Then we offered or up the ante to another $100 million, which was Redbud funds, which would make it actually a total of $600 million that was going to go through the formula. So we offered that yesterday when we were negotiating with the House education people, and that's where we thought we had a deal when we left yesterday.
And in addition to that, just to clarify and put an exclamation point, that also is inclusive of the 150 million of tax credits. So when I say 750, I'm talking about the total education package. So the public school side being 600 on that, and then the actually 155 when you count in homeschooling on the tax credit side of it. And to add emphasis to what Senator Pemberton said, we also within that formula adjusted weights, and he can probably speak more intelligently to what those weights were that we adjusted to try to seek to answer the House's call to get more money to rural small schools.
Can I?
Yeah,
May I?
yeah, you go right ahead.
And I apologize for my voice, everyone, but we have been very firm in our belief that the funding formula is the proper mechanism to get money to schools. Whether you're a rural school, an urban school, a suburban school, the funding formula. And by attaching those dollars to where the students are going, right? Those students are weighted based on different needs that those students may carry. It may be based on their grade level. It may be special needs or special abilities. They may be socioeconomically disadvantaged. So there are a number of ways where dollars flow according to what the student needs. And wherever that student goes, that money goes with them through the funding formula. So we have been very firm that that is the best way to fund students. And in fact, I just want to again emphasize, I'm so thankful that Rhonda Baker and Mark McBride were in that meeting. It's the first time that they got to participate. They're my friends, they're knowledgeable, and they were in agreement that that was the best way to fund schools, is to do the thing that we've been doing for a number of years with the tweaks that we offered. So there were 3 major tweaks that we offered to the funding formula. Number 1, moving the transportation factor from 1.39 to 2. We know that in Biden's economy right now, fuel prices are up. We were almost at $5 a gallon of diesel. Compare that to 3 or 4 years ago when it was $2, $2.15. Operating expenses are up to run your bus and your transportation system. So that transportation money is really important for rural schools that are driving sometimes hundreds of miles a day using their buses to transport kids to and from school. And so this would benefit those schools that have those long miles to drive in their district. In addition to that, the socioeconomic weight going from 0.25 to 0.3. Where there's high concentrations of poverty and high concentrations of students who would qualify for those needs, and this is based on a task force that was run several years ago, a loft report that's come out to change that weight, to make sure that those kids who have those needs. And then finally, in addition to that, there's a small school weight that caps any school under 529 students in average daily membership. They get this small school weight. We up that to 750 students. So you're grabbing almost 400 schools now across the state of Oklahoma that would now qualify for those additional dollars. Then we had those numbers run by the State Department of Education to be able to show what is the school getting this year versus with $500 million of investment into the funding formula and those weight changes, what they would be getting next year. So you're talking on the low end, some very small schools getting hundreds of thousands of dollars of additional money to schools who maybe have high concentrations of poverty, who are driving further because they're a less dense school district, getting several $1 million of additional with that $500 million investment. I think that's a significant change in benefit to rural schools predominantly, where if you calculate the average weighted student per every district, it tends to be those small rural schools where the weighted ADM is higher. And so the more money you put into the formula, the more money attaches to students have a higher weight, more money flows to those students in those rural districts. And then in addition, to top it off, we went from $44 million in Redbud to $100 million in Redbud, which again would help those districts who are low ad valorem and who are having a hard time passing their bonds because they either don't have the bonding capacity or just the community is not supporting that infrastructure in the school district, that this would take that state money and give that money to those districts. That total package, again, Carmen, is $600 million with an additional $150 million in choice this year of the tax credit, and then escalating by $50 million. So in 2 years, you're looking at a package that would be $850 million, or in 3 years, you're looking at a package that would be $850 million.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I don't want to get stuck in math, but we're talking $500 million in the formula, and I've heard 2 different things from you gentlemen in the last couple of minutes on the Redbud. Twice it's been said it would go from 44 to 100. Once it was said it would be an extra 100 into Redbud. When you say 600 million, it sounds like you're saying an extra 100. So are we at 556?
100 million total of Redbud, which is an additional 56 million from what the Senate's already sent. Remember, we sent 44 million.
Oh,
A
you
bill
sent
with
this
44
year,
million
you
this
sent
year,
44.
right.
Okay.
So in total, it's 100 million. It's 500 million in the funding formula and then $150 million of tax credits for this year.
Thank you very much, sir.
The 500 million goes in the funding formula, that would be predominantly teacher raises, I mean, would that be accurate?
$286 million, or
286.
$286 million of that would be.
So what happens now?
You know, we were excited about that because it's historic investment in teachers. The best way to help rural schools in our mind is to help rural teachers. Our rural members have told that to us time and again. We were able to negotiate away from our position that 44 is as high as we'd go on Redbud up to 56. We were able to negotiate away from our position that we wanted to go up to 8,000. We really believe that the $8,000 teacher pay plan that went to the top was a far superior plan because it got money to teachers. We think we've been negotiating in good faith. I hope that we can have these conversations in front of all of you all. I'll reiterate that. Justice Taylor has been a huge step forward. Just imagine every Oklahoman, not just the statesman who was there, but every Oklahoman getting to see what we're articulating and understanding what we are advocating for is teachers, money into the formula, and parent choice.
Mr. Pro Tem, you said that the House wanted more money. In what sense? They wanted to raise the price of this package. How?
I'll let Senator Pugh or Pemberton, because I was not in that meeting.
The House came back today and proposed or wanted another $100 million in the Red Button Fund today. So they wanted to go up from $600 million to $700 million, which we feel like right now, looking at our budget, looking at our numbers, there's a limit on how much we can spend because we have 64 other agencies that need funding, higher ed, DPS, Health and Human Services, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, we know kind of how far we can go to make the budget work, working with Senator Thompson and across the way. So we can't put ourselves on a trajectory that we're going to end up in 2 years going into default and end up all the money we give these schools, they're going to have to start riffing teachers. So, I mean, we have a limit. It's just like you have a limit at your home. You know how much you can spend every month, and you spend over that, eventually it's going to catch up with you.
And I do want to add to that, we did agree to one of the modifications they wanted. They offered a second modification of retying the tax credit and the public school funding where they'd be proportionally cut if one was cut. The public school funding was cut through revenue failure or anything else, that we would reduce the tax credit. We did agree to one of their two ask to modify off the agreement from yesterday.
So what's the likelihood of a special session for this issue?
The choice is theirs. We have negotiated in good faith the entire time. I can't tell how much we appreciate that they brought in McBride and Baker yesterday, because then we truly had conversations about the best policy, not necessarily just political decisions, but just what is the best for students, what is the best for the school districts that serve the students, but at the core, what's best for students. So I think they came to the table with that, and I hope that they can get their caucus and their leadership to that point.
Given all these needs that you guys are talking about, what are the odds of tax cuts this year? The governor still wants tax cuts.
Yeah, he's let that be known to me. I read 20 messages to that end a couple weeks ago on veto messages. We are looking at 750 in education is where we're at today. We don't want to spend up to the max. We're not trying to max out at the $1.2 billion that he has referred to. I told the governor, let's deal with one issue at a time. We've got to land this education deal. My caucus is not yet convinced that that is the wisest decision moving forward in economic uncertainty.
Can I ask on a totally unrelated topic? The governor thinks that the legislature should be subject to the Open Records Act. How would you respond to that?
You know, a lot of the work in progress type stuff, we'd have to work through a number of those things. We are open subject on finances and those type of things. I think it could be weaponized. When I used to work for the minority party, I would have loved to have been able to weaponize requests to be able to get into the details. I would have to see an actual proposal, not just rhetoric on it.
So you're saying that basically, like, your colleagues could make records requests against
Yeah.
you guys? Okay.
Yeah. And that's what I would have done. When I worked for Fred Morgan on the House side and Democrats were still in charge of the House, I would have been sending a multitude of them every day just to keep them tied up. So
Sure.
Would that transparency be useful during these negotiations back and forth, though?
maybe, but you know that the question was asked last week about well, the governor at that point had said, well, I have a press availability at the end of every week. Isn't that transparent enough? that'd be tantamount to me saying, well, you all can't come watch what we're doing on the floor, but believe me, at the end, I'll summarize it, and I'll do my best job of summarizing it. So we are already extremely transparent. We transcribe every committee meeting, not transcribe, but we have the closed captioning, live streaming. Every meeting that we make decisions in is open. So I think we have made great strides in transparency. Even since I've been at the helm as pro tem, we've tried to increase that every year. We've tried to increase transparency by having an actual agenda that we seek to follow on the floor that wasn't there before. We comply with the provisions and the spirit of having 48-hour notices, and there's times that we have to waive that if there's like a JCAB meeting, but we get out notices within that 48-hour period, 24-hour. I'm proud of the leadership that I've had in opening up the transparency, and my colleagues are committed to that end. As far as open records and saying, hey, what has Senator Pugh been emailing with constituents, we also get a lot of that stuff. So there'll just be some mechanics you'd have to work out.
Mr. Pro Tem, not to get back too far in the weeds, but the teacher pay, the agreement that was not an agreement last night, ultimately off formula districts, about 45 or so, would they get additional money to cover the teacher pay under?
Yes,
plan?
so the 286 is inclusive of those off formula,
Yes.
Thank
correct?
you.
The changes that you've heard today from the House, has that been whipped at all in your caucus, or is this just coming from you guys? About your opinion of what you heard from the House today?
I have a wrap-up lunch that I do with my caucus members every week, and we didn't whip it, but we discussed it.
Do you feel like the House is moving the goalposts?
You know, I think Representative Baker and Representative McBride have been good people to deal with. They got brought in yesterday, and so I would not accuse them of anything other than them going to their leadership, and their speaker and their floor leader and whatever the leadership team, rejecting what the very people they were empowered, or we thought were empowered to negotiate with us, rejecting their plan. But as far as Representative McBride and Representative Baker, I think they have been honest brokers with us, and we think that they added a lot to the conversation yesterday. Unfortunately, I don't know if it's their caucus that has rejected what they thought was a good plan, or if it's just their leadership. I honestly don't know.
Senator Pugh, you mentioned working with the State Department, running through the numbers with them. Have they been helpful in this process, despite the rhetoric from the superintendent?
You know, we've asked, in addition to asking for public meetings, we've asked the superintendent of public schools to be involved in all of our meetings. I think it was just Monday was the first time that had occurred. And one of the reasons, number one, he's elected as a statewide official to be in charge of public instruction. So we felt like he had to be one of the key people, regardless of how any individual feels about him. The program would be administered through the State Department of Education. They are the chief financial officers for the school system. So any investment that the state made through the funding formula would ultimately be administered through the programs that the State Department runs, funds, and administers. The other thing is we as a legislative body don't have the ability to run the formularies through a software program. We could potentially fat finger a lot of different numbers when we're trying to calculate. And we've done that, and I think we've actually done that quite well, as a lot of us have really become experts in the funding formula. But he has a program, or I should say the State Department has a program, obviously, that knows when you make any change or put any dollar in, how does it get dispersed? And they can do it all the way down to the district level, which we certainly can't do, because I don't have what every student count is in every school district based on the weights, right? So he has to be a part of this, and we have to get numbers, because when we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars of investment, and we want to make sure, again, I want to be very clear, the position of the Senate was every kid matters. Every kid counts. It's never been the Senate's position to do something to only help one kid or only help one part of the state or only help one school district. So we wanted to be able to prove out with our numbers from the State Department that when you put an investment like $500 million into schools, here is the benefit to your school and exactly the money that you would get based on the best numbers of your student count.
I can tell you this week, since we were successful getting him, he has been as helpful as he can. Senator Pugh at the beginning of session was throwing around something that was academic to me about trying to throw more money toward software upgrades and investment in technology at the State Department of Education. I can tell you today that is no longer academic to me. We've got to invest in that because he and his team are doing the absolute best job they can at turning data around. I think that we need to make sure we invest in that so we can get real-time turnaround on that in the future, and that's been underscored. But his cooperation has been greatly appreciated.
Mr. Pro Tem, the House wants this extra $100 million. They also have previously tied the question of the Panasonic American Industrial Park investments to tax cuts. I forget off the top of my head what the cost of a 0.25%.
236.
236. Does there become a time when now some of these other non-education decisions and negotiations you all have on these other things, you know, play against one another, right? Like if you're at 750 and you're only wanting to get to 900, do you have to make a decision on tax cuts and stuff like that?
Yes, absolutely.
Time for a couple more, Mr. President.
Any other questions?
Just to clarify the Redbud, the request that they made today, were they asking for $100 more? What's the total?
200 total into Redbud.
200 total, so
yeah.
150.
156 additional to what we had already sent over in a piece of legislation authored by Roger Thompson to take it, I think, from 12 last year. Is that right?
Right,
12 to 44. We had already known there was growth. I mean, that was based on a formula. The formula got us to 38 million, but we put in an additional 6 on Roger Thompson's bill. And then, so it'd be an additional 156 million off what the Senate position was at the beginning of the session.
And just to clarify, the red bond comes from medical marijuana, is that right? Are there any concerns about that tax revenue pile declining? I think it's down 17% this year collections to date.
Yes, certainly. And you have to remember when the state question was posed to the people of Oklahoma, it was posed in a manner to say, if you vote for this, there's additional education revenue coming because we're going to back out a dedicated portion of the revenue that medical marijuana brings in to schools. So Redbud already, in my opinion, takes money from districts that potentially voted for medical marijuana and takes some of that money away by reallocating it across the state.
Is there any consideration just to take the tax credits off the table and just consider public schools alone this year and worry about tax credits next year?
I have asked our counterparts, are they serious about school choice or are they not? And I have yet to get a definitive answer either in practice or verbally.
But that doesn't answer.
We've already passed the school choice portion of it. It's completely in the speaker's court. So our body has already spoken. I think we put 36 votes up, I believe, and passed that. But we passed it after we passed a historic investment in public schools. The House passed the tax credit, holding it hostage, and then they rejected unanimously the teacher pay raise. That's a better question for them than me.
Yeah, but I mean, the speaker's holding the tax credit bill. I mean, would you guys be okay if that didn't go to the governor's desk? You just did public school funding?
If he comes back and says he's not going to advance that, that's another discussion. Right now, the discussion is the whole education investment.
Thanks, everyone.
Very good.
Thank you.